The first time I had sex was I think it was a 1958 push-button Dodge, salmon-colored. Man, and it had a back seat like a full-size futon. It was fabulous. I mean, you could really get into it, you know. And they all called, now I drive a Mini Cooper, and geez, I can't even get a nap in that, much less fucked. But anyway. But I digress. Really, I did get pregnant. I got pregnant the first time I had sex. I was 16. What are the odds of this? And I had twins, twin boys. They were born very prematurely. Only one survived. And I found out a few months after a few months later, that he had cerebral palsy. And I thought, well, okay, this is not exactly, I was 16. This is not exactly how I had envisioned my teenage years, but this unexpected event actually it gave me the escape that I had been looking for my little small town in western Pennsylvania since I was 5. I knew everybody in town. I was really probably related to everybody in town. If you know what I mean, the little mountain towns, you get the idea. And cousins, called Chewy, because he was 6 and he chewed tobacco and kept it in his pocket, but a cool place, a wonderful place. The Allegheny River ran across the town. I mean, in front of the town, and it was built on the banks of the town, and it was an idyllic place. I played with my friends, surrounded by mountains, and we would build forts in the woods. I wasn't afraid of anything. It was safe, idyllic, and sweet, but it was small. And the Pennsylvania Railroad also ran right through the town, and it was across the street from our house, from my grandpa's bar and restaurant that my mother and my grandpa owned, and we lived above it. And I would watch these people come in on the Pennsylvania Railroad, and I would think, who are they? Where are they going? Where have they come? And where are they coming from? And where they're going? And my imagination would think, oh my God, I know that they have a more exciting life than I do, and I know that they must be going someplace exciting, and I wanted to go, and the best I could do was start hitchhiking at age 7 and make like 3 or 4 miles, to my friend's Gary to ride his ponies, and then I'd have to hurry up and hitchhike back, and I'd have to hide behind bushes so no one would see me, so I wouldn't ride with anybody I knew, and that's really hard when you're related to everybody. And so, but it worked for a couple of summers, but anyway, I was and just dreaming and fantasizing about getting out of town, and then we got a TV when I was 5. It was about the first TV in town, and I started watching westerns and Howdy Doody and all that stuff, but when I saw the Ed Sullivan show, and I would watch these glamorous women like Bess Meyerson, who was Miss America, and Loretta Young, who was an Academy Award, and they were so glamorous. And I was completely mesmerized by this, and I thought, that's out there. That's over these hills, right over these hills, right there. And and I wanted to go there. Now, and I have to say that, oh, and the other thing that I did was I started putting messages into bottles and putting corks in them and dropping them in the river. Oh, and with our 4-digit phone number. And yes, and with party lines, so everybody in town knew if I was going to make my escape. Let me tell you that 15 cousins and 3 aunts would have known it. I would have had a hard time getting out of town. But as it turns out, I would say to my mom, she knew what I was doing, and I would say, "So, Mom, have I had any calls today?" And she'd say, "No, honey, you haven't, but be patient, you know, it'll happen." And I believed it. I believed somebody as far away as Pittsburgh would actually call me and, I don't know, rescue me maybe? But, so anyway, so then my mother was this really beautiful Irish woman with reddish auburn, thick, lush auburn hair and green hazel eyes and beautiful skin, and she could play the piano, she could play classical music, she could play the boogie woogie, she could sing, she was a dancer, she sang in a barbershop quartet. But when we got the TV, you know, when I kind of compared her to Loretta Young and this glamour that came out of Hollywood, you know, she didn't quite measure up. I took my disabled son to Atlanta, Georgia. And so this was in 1960. And when I got there, my husband picked me up. He was my teenage boyfriend, and he had gone there because his parents lived there. And so when he picked me up, he took me to our first apartment, and it was gorgeous. It was this L-shaped white brick building with a huge, pristine blue pool right in the middle. And it had, around the sides of the pool were these shapely women in bikinis and sexy men and little bathing suits like they didn't wear in Foxburg, let me tell you. And they had drinks that were exotic. I knew they were exotic because there was fruit sticking out of the drinks. And they were at stems and shit. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is it. This is where I wanted to go. And so I was just, I loved it. I mean, it was like I had arrived at the place on the other side of the mountain. But the fairy dust kind of wore off. By the end of that year, my son's pediatrician had told me to put him in a home where he would be with other people like his own kind. And one of my neighbors had called me a fucking Yankee bitch because I stuck up for the black woman, Maggie, who was my housekeeper, because this woman had said some mean things about Maggie, and I told her to go fuck herself, and you know, that Maggie was a free woman, and that she didn't know anything, or she'd have known about, you know, the Civil War, and but I, all of a sudden, my beautiful dream had no bigotry and racism and hate and rejection and all this stuff. And I started thinking about my little town, and I started appreciating it. I started thinking about how safe it was and loving it was, and how people loved you no matter what you did or who you were, and I had not run into any of this hatred before, and so it started to seem better. Not that I wanted to go back there, understand, but it was looking better in my mind. But what I did was I went to college. I got educated, and through the years, I kept my son, and I met people who believe that, like I do, that we are all the same, and I. Yeah. And I called on my mother a lot, and it occurred to me that my mother, who I had been, and my friends and family, who I'd been a little bit ashamed of when I first moved to, the white building with the pool, and didn't want to tell them I was a country bumpkin. I realized that my mother was both inside and out, probably the most beautiful woman on the planet.